morning.
Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. We invite you to come closer.
You might see some boxes on your tables. These boxes are for you. We hope you don't have a super small size hand luggage, because then this might be a challenge. So feel free to open them. No one opened them, actually.
And some goodies inside.
So hopefully the gifts on the table will bring you closer. Closer, sit. It's for the box as well. Or maybe we don't tell you, so we see what you do with it. That's also a possibility. Morning. I guess we have quite a few late risers, huh? Because they're just coming into the room. Slow, or
slow riser. Slow eaters. Yes. How about online audience? Gubas, how many we have right now?
Okay, let's see. 30. 30.
30,
30,
right.
Which is almost more than what we have now in the room. Which is
still, I suppose, people coming in also online. The slow eaters, yeah.
yeah. You can also be a slow eater at home. Huh? Morning. Take a seat, claim your goodies. Click, click. All right.
If you feel a bit lonely also, you may maybe join the other table. It's nice when you can share things with each other. For example,
Costas and Monica, maybe you want to... No? All good?
If you would dare.
I mean, for the first task of the morning, you would need some people to talk to, at least another person, yeah? So if you're alone, it might be nice to have company. Oh, there we go. All right, so we hope you had an enjoyable night, and you did whatever you needed, slept, talked to people, had a walk, or joined the online tour, if you're online or also rested. And when we are hoping you're ready for the whole day. We also realized in short formats like this one, you start and you're already somehow understanding that you're looking towards the end of the conference. But anyways, today we have a full day, long day, so hopefully you're rested and ready for it. Yeah, very, very, very low, yeah, somewhere in the distance. And that also goes for online audiences. We hope that most of you will be able to join us for the majority of the day, and if not, for as much as you can. We will soon bring some people on stage and also on the screens, and we are very excited about this. This will be a conversation, and that we hope will change our lives. No pressure to our speakers. And before that, we actually wanted to give you a bit of space to warm up for the conversation. And you might have seen some cards in the middle of the table, some cards that are familiar from our past lives when we actually did some things residentially. They're not gifts. Gifts are in the boxes. So the cards are just there for the activity. And we wanted to start the day with a question. When you hear Future Fit Youth Worker, what do you see? Yeah? Yes. Mm-hmm. And the cards might help you. Yeah, so you can turn around the cards that you have in the middle of the table, and if they help you see the Future Fit Youth Worker, please use them. Yeah? If not, if you already have a very clear image in your head, ignore the cards and just do it from your head. And once you have the cards, please do share briefly with your neighbors. Yeah, so what do you see when you hear Future Fit Youth Worker? For our online audience, you will hear from Gubas, but you also have Dixit cards, amazingly.
Virtual ones.
Yeah, in the online format. So you will pick the card that suits you, and then we will also show it with us on the screen. Yeah, so instruction is very simple. Think for a moment, when you hear Future Fit Youth Worker, what do you see? Pick a card and share with your neighbors. All right? Enjoy a few moments of sharing. I think we can go down.
Hi. I just shared the link with you in the chat. And what I will do now is that I will quickly send you to the buzz groups, which is like groups of 2 people, and then you can share. And please don't forget to heart the one that you feel is the one. You will have few minutes, so just take it into consideration. And the breakout rooms are coming. Just a second.
All right. Hopefully you have woken up a little bit. So before we move on, we wanted to see somehow, yeah, because we cannot hear the feedback, but we can at least see a bit. So if you can take your card, if you had a card, yeah, so if you can take the card that you had in your hand, yeah, so if you have used the card to reflect, just take it in your hand, and on the count to 3, some people have already done it. It's the good students. On the count to 3, we ask you to put it up. Yeah. So maybe at least at the neighboring tables you will see what other people
look around,
have chosen. Yeah. And then soon we will also have the Padlet from the online groups where they were choosing on the count. Well, count to 3 means 1, 2, 3. Okay. Not when I say 3. Okay? And then, yeah, we ask you to put it in the air, you look around a bit, we see the Padlet, and then at least we have a sense a little bit, yeah? 1, 2, 3. Hey!
Keep it.
Keep it. You
And look around. What other people have?
It's nice.
And you can also see what our online audience was choosing. So if there is a heart on the picture, so I can comment a little bit what we see. We have a person picking up the stars, 2 hearts there, a snow angel.
Yeah, we have 2 hearts.
Someone walking in the street.
Up there, someone looking through the, there, through the keyhole. That's quite nice. In the orchard. Orchard, is that how you say it? With the apples?
Massive apples in the street. Yeah.
Some people, of course, always take 2 cards.
Of course.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for that. You can put them down. As we said, hopefully they warm your brains a little bit, hearts, bodies maybe. And then we are also super happy to introduce 3 conversationalists that we will have today with us. We really try to call it and design it as a conversation between the 3 people. One of them will join us on stage, and you will be surprised. Yeah, the person is somewhere in the room, and 2 people will be joining us on the screen. Well, you will not be surprised anymore. Yeah. So we have Hilary Tierney that will be with us on the stage. Hilary, please join us. So I move a little bit to the side. This is all a bit impractical. And as we were talking with Hilary, there is really no elegant way to climb this seat, so we apologize in advance. We also have Matthijs Lendertse that will appear soon on the screen. Yes. And we have also Nerijus Kreuchunas. Yeah, I was practicing all the 3 names. I know it's not perfect, right? But we have an Irish, Dutch, and Lithuanian name here. I mean, it's really an incredible combo, yeah? So we have the 3 speakers with us who have very diverse backgrounds. You can see it there. We have the youth work educator with us, Hilary. We have Matthijs, who is also in the field of business, but also teaching in the university. We have Nerijus, who is active in the international youth work field. Yeah? And we will try, actually, to have a talk and to try to peek a little bit to understand what is Future Fit Youth Work and who are Future Fit Youth Workers, yeah? And what does that mean for us? So, Matthijs is there. Hi, Matthijs. And Nerijus is there as well. Hi, Nerijus. Maybe you can say hi so we know that you can hear us and see. I think you can hear us. You were doing some signs, but that we can hear you as well.
Hi, happy to join in my virtual flesh.
Happy to see you, Nerijus. Matthijs? No, not yet. Okay. So when we make sure that Matthijs is with us, then we will invite our speakers to introduce themselves.
Matthijs, we can see you, but the audio is not coming through yet.
Great, I think it should happen now.
Aha,
right?
yes.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself, but now it should work. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Matthijs. All right, so maybe just a brief introduction from the 3 of you, so we understand who is with us in the room, in presence or virtually, and we start with Hilary. So Hilary, good morning.
Good morning.
Maybe you tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah?
So I am a youth worker. We were talking about this yesterday, some of us, and in my sense of myself, I am a youth worker, but I have to also acknowledge that I have an academic position in a university where I'm a youth work educator. So those sort of three dimensions really shape who I am. I think not just about who I am in my work, and outside my work, I am trying to rediscover some of the things that I've been passionate about in my younger life. So I am learning again how to sail, because I live near the sea in County Wicklow, and I'm rediscovering the delight of kite flying.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Wow, that's quite interesting information there. Thank you. Nereus, Matthijs, I hope you are ready to match this with some exciting hobbies that you have. So maybe Matthijs, you can tell us also a little bit about yourself and some exciting hobby that you have.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think I can't beat sailing, so that's unfortunate, but I'll try. So good morning, everybody. My name is Matthijs Leenertse. By the way, extremely good pronunciation, because I have a quite difficult name sometimes for non-Dutch speakers. So I'm a media economist by training, and my focus is particularly on how digital technology can help to stimulate evolution in other industries, in particular in education. So I've been working with sort of developing new propositions for education, both for businesses, but also for museums and educational institutions. And I've been teaching for the last 20 years, of which the last 16 at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where I do courses on media innovation, of course, but also on futures research. So how can you explore and research the future? So that's a theme I think I'll talk a bit about more later. Well, in terms of my hobbies, I used to be very much into cooking, and like everybody during the COVID pandemic, there was not so much to do. So I basically started sort of my cooking hobby again. I love reading. I'm a big fan of yoga, and sort of, yeah, that's a bit my background, and meditation as well. So that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Matthijs. A bit of a calmer approach to life than Hillary at the moment, I think. But let's see what Nereus has to offer. So good morning, Nereus. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Nereus. I'm working as international trainer, delivering training activities for educators, youth leaders, youth workers. I'm based in Vilnius, but often doing things internationally, and not maybe too much connected locally nowadays, but more internationally. About hobbies, I think since my genetic material climbed from sea to land, I'm very much on the land, standing, laying down and so on. I don't like to fly too much with kites or similar devices and so on. And sea, it's sometimes calming me when I see it, but I'm a bit afraid of going into deep seas, you know. But yeah, and I'm a very big fan of science fiction, and I think that's what brings me very much into thinking about futures and so on. I'm in my mind, I have a lot of futures inspired by great books, movies, and so on. So I'm happy to join this conversation today.
Thank you, Nereus. And maybe information from Matthijs and Nereus, we are looking down a bit because you are on the screen in front of us. So we try to look also in the camera, but this is how we feel that you're with us somehow on the stage as well. And before we actually dive into the conversations, which we announced at least 5 times already, just maybe to say how you can also join the conversation. So Laimunas.
Yes, we don't want to be just a one-way conversation, so we will have again a Mentimeter, which is more like Q&A Mentimeter. Yeah, so soon it will appear on the screen, and therefore you can also find the link, I suppose, from the event app. But there, Sabrina, I don't know if we can show the code for joining the Mentimeter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you present, the code is not there. So the code is you need to use your mobile device or computer Yes, here we go. So the code is so you go to menti.com and you enter the code 37347321. Yeah, so that's the secret code you need to enter. Also, online audience, you can participate as well. And while you are listening for the conversation, share your can be specific question to one of the speakers, can be question to all the group of speakers, and maybe some kind of thought. And you also will be able to upvote. So you will see like thumbs up sign, and if you think like that relates a lot to you as well, or you thought like, wow, this is really good question that can feed into the conversation. So please upvote, and then we will be looking what we have, also based a bit on the time, how many of these questions we can bring in back to conversation.
Thank you, Lyman. And Hillary, you won't be able to do this, but Nereus and Matthijs, because you're behind the screens, you can also cheat and use the app and then just put your question there that you would like to be asked. Anyways, let's start. So the question that we asked you with the cards and online audience as well with the cards was, so when you hear Future Fit Youth Worker or Youth Worker, what do you see? And this is also the question that we asked our friends today in this conversation, to also tell us a little bit about what they see and what is their concept of Future Fit. So Hillary, you start from you. You will also able to sense a bit, you join one of the conversations, actually, and also then you have a little bit of disadvantage that you sit with us in the room, yeah? So Hillary, what is Future Fit Youth Work for you?
Well, I'm getting used to, as I get older, being one of the oldest people in the room, and I felt that a little bit yesterday, but now when I look out, I absolutely feel like one of the older people in the room. And so therefore the future for me may not be the future that it is for some people in the room, and maybe that's one of the things that's, for me, is really interesting about it. And I think the older, I didn't sleep very well last night thinking about this, because I found some of the conversations yesterday during the day and over dinner very stimulating and knocked me a little bit in terms of stimulated my thinking and made me think, oh, what do I think about that? So I'm not quite sure whether it's attributed to Einstein or Aristotle, but I'm definitely in the more I learn, the less I know, you know, and the more questions I have. So when I think about Future Fit Youth Work, it is a term that makes me a little bit uncomfortable at some level, because I think youth work has always had to and does straddle that space between the here and now, like immediately paying attention to what's going on here and now in the lives of young people, but also working with those young people in a way that is about them stepping through time and space into their own futures. And I think that that's a job we've done well, and I think there's an evolutionary, I think we need to think about youth work as an evolutionary practice, and therefore as youth workers, and for me then as a youth work educator, it is about being awake and aware and curious and thinking about what's it like to be now, to be us now. The world changes really dramatically, we know that. Unimaginable things happen. You know, even in my own country, we're experiencing a sort of a centenary of a decade of centenaries at the moment. So we are independent since 1922, we're a republic since 1949, deeply conservative country, really poor country. But in 2015, we were the first country in the world to achieve marriage equality by public referendum, by changing the constitution. And that was driven by young people, and that was driven by youth work, a future that was unimaginable. And so in some way, when I think about Future Fit Youth Work, it is about the promise of youth work to young people, and then the ask of youth workers to do that. So I don't think it's about saying, predicting, and I think we have people here today who are really good at the conversation about what are the trends in society, what sort of things are emerging. And I think for me, it's about us as youth workers and youth work educators engaging that curiosity, engaging in critical thinking, encouraging young people's critical thinking about, and the wonder that young people have, the questions that they have, and working with them in ways that help them to really get passionate about that and excited about that. And so then we can develop and adapt practices that continue to evolve so that we are I think always in that process of movement. And somebody talked yesterday, I think Lucy talked about navigation. So we're always in that process of navigating and negotiating. And so I think we should be taking comfort in some way about that a future fit is not some aspirational thing at some point in the future that we're going to have to think about in a particular sort of way. I think the world changes. We have to embrace uncertainty. We have to get comfortable with uncertainty. We have to try and stay steady in that, create spaces for young people to stay steady, even when it feels like the world is falling down around us at times, and then creating spaces for young people to work together. And if I think about, and I'll finish with this, but if I think about reading again this morning about, say, the European Youth Strategy, and even those three huge concepts of connecting and engaging and empowering, I mean, they are at the heart of youth work. You don't need, European Youth Strategy to tell us this. People know this from their practice. But the big question is, well, how do we do that? And that, for me, is where something like then the training strategy comes in to help us to create a community of practice where we engage really in the challenge of those big promises around connecting, around engaging, about empowering. And how do we do that in a way then that keeps us moving through time and space?
Thank you, Hilary. I don't want to say I'm glad you didn't sleep, but certainly some things came through during the night. So thank you for that. And Matthijs, what do you say to this question? Yeah, so when you hear Future Fit Youth Work, how does that sound to you?
Well, I really like the comment that Hilary just made by embracing uncertainty, because I feel that Future Fit starts with acknowledging that the future is uncertain. And if you look at some of the research that's being done going forward, you see that particularly for young people, the future is more uncertain than ever, because change is accelerating due to a lot of different factors, like, for instance, technology, where we see the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we see on the one hand, for instance, that technology allows the empowerment of disadvantaged groups like Black Lives Matter or LGBTQI communities, or as Hilary just also said, like the referendum in Ireland on marriage equality was driven by young people. But at the same time, we also see polarization in society. We see also the rise of extreme right and different forces. Young people are confronted with changes in demographics, the reality of multicultural society and how to navigate that. On top of that, we have environmental challenges. We just had a pandemic, and now the unthinkable has happened, war again in Europe. So I can imagine, if you're young, that it can feel also uncertain, not just embracing the uncertainty, but also feel uncertain. And I see it as our job as educators, and I'll be talking a bit more from the perspective from education than from the perspective of a youth worker. But I think it's our job to help young people navigate this uncertain future. And one of the things that I do myself is that we use futures research methods, where we help young people to explore potential futures, create, prepare for, but also take advantage or change potential futures. Because I really believe that thinking about the future can also allow us to change the future. And that's, again, that example that Hilary gave on the referendum in Ireland on gay marriage, I think is a really good one in that sense. Myself, there are three topics that I find extremely important, but that's really coming from my background. One is the future of education. The second one is the notion of citizenship, which is a huge topic, at least in my country at the moment. Like, how can we have people think about what are democratic principles that we have, what is rule of law, but also how can we be able to have discussions with one another with people we totally disagree with without hating them, Why can we use it as a conversation to learn from each other? It's something that schools and cultural institutions are now increasingly looking into how to deal with that. And I think that citizenship is a really key thing if you think about, I think, future fit education, but probably also youth work. And the third one, and that's also in the previous conference where I spoke, is to ensure equal opportunities, because we see that with technology, we have all these amazing new opportunities for learning and getting ahead in life. But we also see that they mainly come from the private sector, which also means that we get a lot of inequality. And I think that's also something to discuss. But I want to end with sort of my main message. I think the future might be uncertain, and we can think about it, we can create it, we can research that. But I think the most important thing is if you think about the future, we have to have a value-based approach to thinking about and particularly shaping the future. And there are certain values, I think, that youth workers, but also within education, we should all strive for, like safeguarding human rights and dignity, equal opportunities, upholding and defending democratic principles, and lastly, always put the interest of children and youth first. So I think this value-based approach is required when thinking about the future, because the future is not neutral. So that was my 2 cents, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthijs, and thank you for bringing in the value-based. Much appreciated, for sure. And I guess we will be coming back to that as well. And Nerijus, technology and uncertainty are certainly not the words that are foreign to you. I'm sure that you have also something to say to that and in general about your understanding of future fit youth work.
Well, when I think about future fit youth work, I think of a fitness club where you go and you get training and you prepare for whatever it comes. So, although I'm not going to fitness, I enjoy more walking in the streets of cities and villages and listening to science fiction. But nevertheless, I think it's all about our self-education, our learning, our thinking about futures. And I think I already hear from Hilary and Matthijs some interesting thoughts which resonate to me a lot. I would like to share screen using the opportunity and tell a few things what I follow, at least myself, and try to convey when doing trainings to youth workers. We talk about uncertainty, and that model for me explains a little bit how to deal with uncertainty to some extent. Where are kind of in time continuum 3 moments we can live through. Present, clearly, we are living now and here, and often in youth work, present is the most important thing because we want to help young people, support them in present needs, aspirations and interests, but looking forward to the future, which is very uncertain because yet nobody lived through that future, so we don't have any data and information. We can have some guesses to some extent. And then past, we kind of know about past because we research it very well. We have institutions which look into the past. We have evidence, methodologies, how to know what was happening in the past. Just we interpret sometimes that, yeah. And what happens often, these 3 moments of time has different weight. Sometimes the present is so heavy that we cannot think about past or future. Today, maybe it's the time when we cannot think clearly about future because it is so pressing present, yeah? Or another example, when certain things in education or youth work are not reformed or no innovations happening, maybe the past experiences, institutions, from a legacy point of view, they kind of put weight on that and we say, we do things the way we did decades, and that is proven and so on. So when thinking about futures, it's kind of important to realize where we live and where we put weight on, yeah? So that's one thing. Another thing, we talk often and imagine a binary futures, dystopian, utopian, and that's very much fed by mainstream media, books, and so on. So I want to introduce something what I'm fascinated about more. It's protopia, futures, and it's something what Matthijs was asking or saying, suggesting. Let's look for something into the future where it's value-based. So I invite you to look into protopia, futures, thinking about more hopeful futures and do-it-yourself futures in a way. So for me, sometimes I'm not about only future fit youth work, but also future makers in a way. I call young people, adults, to be future makers. Let's make futures ourselves and try to construct them, build, fail, and so on. So all of these kind of ideas I very much follow myself, but also I like to promote when doing training activities with youth workers, youth leaders, and for me, I want also to pick up age as a topic. I think we should not place too much weight on age when we talk about futures. Yeah, we still think about futures, regardless how long we have been to. But if you stretch your mind and you think that maybe soon we will achieve replaceable organs, regenerative body cells, maybe we have a chance to live long. So let's imagine that kind of future. You go to the shop and buy a bit of kidneys and liver or something and go home and replace it, yeah. Why not? Yeah. And then practical, because I think in audience we have a lot of practitioners. Myself, I like to be practical. I am not that big talker in a way. So a few things I want to share as resources for making hopeful futures. InnoBox from Verke, you can download it in PDF. It's designed for youth work organizations to innovate practices. It's step-by-step, really creative, easy, diverse methods and tools. You can use it. We, as partnership of Cities of Learning, we created a learning playlist to complement this, especially in pandemic when maybe a box and meetings of people were not possible, but at least we offered the digital tools to complement this material. And we did it with youth leaders, young people, with youth workers and educators. So that's one of the resources I want to share. And second one, we lately follow a lot the global youth skills methodology, which researches young people, including young people's voices and narratives, and then builds models, future personas, and very practical toolbox for educators, youth workers, youth leaders. And we have very nice innovator's guide, which is only 2 pages. Imagine, you read a guide for future and it's only 2 pages. You don't need to read too much. Yeah? I think I like that simplicity in life. And again, we complement that with some learning playlist, interactive resources, videos, and badges to get for activities you do. So for me, that's maybe what I imagine as future fit youth work, and the training included in that understanding and concept.
Thank you, Darius. I'm not sure how keen I am on the future where we buy kidneys in the supermarket, but everything else sounds sounds quite good. And I think sometimes it's, if we talk about, and then we heard your visions of future fit, and then there were different things shared around the tables, but sometimes a more complicated question is how we get there. Yeah, and what do we need to get there? And we have the question that we share already, and I saw it popping out in the screen, is what is the main competence? Or maybe we kind of open it a bit more. So what are the key competences, or what needs to be learned in order to get us to the future fit youth workers or future fit youth work? So what do you think about that? And then whoever would like to start can offer their answer.
I'm thinking that in our field we say to learn everything for the future, we need to learn how to learn. I think that's what we embraced since ages, and I think it's super valid. And I think it's something what now recently surfaced, especially due to pandemic, where business realized, oh, how can we prepare everyone for uncertainty? Oh, let's make them learn to learn. But at least it surfaced in future skills kind of in demand researches. And I look into these skill sets which are kind of expected, and I see, oh, we can tick that box, we can tick that box, we can tick that box. And I'm saying, hey, where have you been 20 years ago? Why you disregarded what youth work was doing, what non-formal education was doing in society? Now you say, we needed that skill or that skill. So I think that's one thing, learning to learn for sure. And another skill I would think, or a kind of set of skills related to futures thinking. I think for any type of education, if we would teach futures as much as we teach histories, you have a lesson of history, 45 minutes every week, twice, you have the same about futures thinking, yeah? Across all spectrum of education, including youth work trainings. I think only recently we started to do more about including topics about the future, because a lot we were spending about current challenges, pressing challenges, often challenges posed by other sectors to youth work to respond. Unemployment, wars, anything you name, youth work needs to respond because it's now and pressing. We shift priorities very fast when it's coming from a need of present. Yeah, that would be maybe 2 essential skills for future fit youth work.
I'm hearing Hillary agreeing a lot. I was seeing Matthijs putting his thumbs up. So anything to add, guys? Anything to build on this?
I think for me, if I can come in, I think it does come back to to the promise of the work, you know, and what we're setting out to do and what we say to young people about what they will experience in youth work and the opportunities that they will experience, and things that are in the various sort of policy documents about how youth work is not just about young people as individuals, but also about them as members of communities, members of society, people who can take action, who can shape. And then it makes the job of the things that get asked of youth workers in order to facilitate that sort of learning very firmly. I think one of the things we need to do is embrace youth work as a pedagogy, as a learning practice, and then really to explore what do we mean by that. What do we mean by pedagogy and engaged pedagogy in that sense? And then how does that blend with the values of youth work? And I think sometimes then it means for us as youth workers and youth work educators unpacking and maybe dismantling somehow of how we traditionally think about learning and how we traditionally think about knowledge, and embrace ideas around, you know, learning with and alongside young people rather than being the one who knows, and acknowledging young people's expertise in their own lives. And I saw the word there earlier in one of the questions about, you know, counteracting. I do think there's a job of youth work, an ethical commitment in some way to counteract some of the prevailing ways that young people are viewed in society, where youth work has a tendency, I think sometimes in my country, to be co-opted as a way of managing young people, of managing their behaviours, about managing what are seen to be their deficits in some way. And I think we need to act from the value base that we say is about empowering, is about, as I said, being with and alongside young people. And then I think that requires youth workers to be brave, to be curious, to harness our own imaginations, to take risks in the same ways we ask young people to take risks. So I think our disposition towards our own learning and our ability to take young people seriously as knowers now, in the here and now, and engage them in that process. And in the night when I couldn't sleep, I was reading bell hooks in the middle of the night, and I just got such reassurance. So I was also thinking something about who are the people we want to be in conversation with. So bell hooks talks about critical thinking and about igniting young people's curiosity about their willingness to ask questions, to grapple with the hard questions, the questions of the future, the questions of, is it inevitable, the things that are happening? How do we have control? How do we engage some agency? Mamadou Saleh talks about the job of youth work being around provoking consciousness, taking action. And I think that is the thing that keeps me connected in the work, and that keeps me, I suppose, passionate as an educator, because our practice has to be hopeful. It has to, I think, in some way, be based around ideals and not be afraid to wear our ideals in some way on our sleeve, but also to be really pragmatic in grounding those ideals in sort of strategies and tactics and plans and programs, and working in collaboration with other people. So I think the competences are exactly those competences that I think youth work has always had. And in some way counteracting ideas that learning to learn is an instrumental thing because the world is uncertain. Learning to learn is how human beings evolve. It's about how we express being human. And I think that youth work really gives an opportunity, and youth work competence that really engages what it means to be human, grappling with all of the uncertainty, but doing it together in a way that shares power, that is inclusive, that imagines a different future, but also makes some plans about how we might get there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Once again, a very
Great.
productive night. Here, go, Matthijs.
Yeah. I should have some sleepless nights as well. I think it yields a lot of interesting thoughts. I actually agree a lot with some of the previous speakers, because I think indeed, like, also turn people into future makers. As Norwegians just said, I think is really, really a good point. I think if you start to think about competences, it depends a bit, of course, on the level of engagement with children or youth, because I think a lot of people probably have different things that they focus on. I think dealing with uncertainty in general requires some kind of flexibility, also to let go of your own ideas, and indeed like to engage with the target group, but also always keeping those values in mind, which I think is something that we can really help young people with, because I think we need to get updated continuously on the lives of young people and what they are using, what they are going through. I think a good example for me still is, for instance, the use, but that's a bit because it's my field, the use of technology. We've seen it with gaming, we've seen it with use of social media. I'm not saying that they're sort of bad instruments, but I think we tend to forget that we need to help young people how to navigate those technologies, not from a technological perspective, but from a human perspective. But that means that we constantly need to be updated and see what happens. Because we see a lot of things, of course, for instance, with gaming addiction, etc., that we probably could have preempted. But I also really agree with the point of Hillary, that we shouldn't just look at deficiencies and things that don't go well, but really also look at sort of helping them to get some sense of agency to create a future themselves. And there are certain instruments and methodologies that you could use for that. One of them that is often used is something called backcasting. That's a sort of a futures research methodology where you don't necessarily think about what could happen in the future, but what's the future that I would like. So what's the future that's good for me or that's good for society, depending, of course, on who's asking. And then you can try to find steps from the now in order to build this future for yourself. And I think it's a really empowering thought that you could have a lot of influence over your own future. Also things like co-creation with young people, but also have them perhaps interact with other parts of society or other groups that they normally don't engage with, to come up with very concrete solutions for issues that their generation might find themselves in. And that could range from design thinking, where you really start to think about creating new products and services and solutions, to just having sort of discussions, etc. And it's really about facilitating that process where they sort of have the driver's seat, but I think the role that you could take is sort of like the helping with sort of the process and the methods, and at the same time always going back to these values. Because if you think about defining a future for yourself, you could always think like, what does that imply from this value perspective, sort of this ethical assessment of what you're trying to achieve for yourself and for others. But that's just some thoughts that popped up in my head from the previous speakers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And the questions are coming from Menti, and a lot of them. And maybe before we turn to that screen, or rather to that tool, maybe because we talked about the future fit, and then the competences, and then education and training are one of the main ways, arguably, to get us there. Yeah. And Matthijs, you were also saying, besides future, you do future of learning as well. So how can this learning that is orientated and education towards future fit look like? Yeah, what could be the approaches? What could be the formats? We'd start with you maybe, but then it's a question for our other two guests as well.
Yeah. I think one of the great lessons of the pandemic is that offline will always be crucial to learning. Human contact, seeing each other, is one of the most superior ways, I think, to get together and do things. So I think the social component of that, I think that will remain really important. But there are some things, if you go forward, I think that we will see also a lot of sociality on sort of online digital platforms happening, which you see, of course, already. I mean, if you saw kids during the pandemic working together on platforms like Discord, and really sort of blurring the lines between sort of getting sort of together offline and working online. But I think one of the key changes is that we are moving slowly away from a one-size-fits-all approach to learning to a much more human-centric approach, so to see what individual humans need. Also because we are increasingly getting all these systems that can track what people know, what they do, where they should be. I was talking to an educational publisher yesterday, and they said that they basically are moving away even from traditional textbooks and making on-demand textbooks what schools or even individual children might need, because they just want to be much more personalized in their approach towards learning for primary, secondary, but even also vocational training. So this human-centric approach is, I think, for learning increasingly important. And I think people can learn a lot from youth workers in that respect, because that is also really starting often with the individual. And if you think about technology, and I think what will be really a change, I think, particularly also potentially for disadvantaged groups also in countries where the education system isn't so strong is interactive immersion, where we will get combinations of intelligent tutoring systems, so where you would have humanized interfaces that you can talk to, that can teach you certain things. It will never replace offline, but it's just in addition to offline, using virtual reality, perhaps augmented reality. I think that's gonna be a big change. And I'm working in several projects now, for instance, on virtual reality. And I'm doing a big research project with students on the impact of the metaverse, potential impact of the metaverse going forward, and how we can ensure that our values around education will also be maintained in the metaverse. And for people who don't know, the metaverse is still very much under construction and everybody's talking about it, but it still has to materialize what it is. But the idea is that there's this blurring of basically the physical and the virtual world, and that the virtual world, in the way that it looks and feels, will start to mimic more also the offline world. So you can basically walk from Facebook to Google, to just make a very explicit analogy. That also will lead to new ways of learning and collaborating, which is quite interesting. And I'm not a big fan of Facebook, or we should call it Meta at the moment, but if you're into this, they did have some interesting videos on their official Meta YouTube channel where they envision some of these futures with some videos. I can also share it later, but that's, you should always take that into account that it's very much a corporate, but it's quite interesting to see how they think about like collaboration going forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Matthijs. And Nerius, maybe also along those lines, sorry, Hilary, do you want to go first?
No, go.
No? I was also thinking, how can they bring us maybe closer to the protopian future that you were talking about? Can education and training help in that?
I think for sure. I'm right now contemplating one idea which I'm looking for partners if you want to join. I think in YouthWork one of the priorities was always to prepare young people for work life in a way, especially in the big unemployment times like after 2008. I think all priority was shifting to let's get these young people back to work. And I'm already looking for partners to apply for funding projects and working on preparing people for a jobless society. So what do we need to know when jobs will disappear? And people say, and also researchers say, it will not happen tomorrow, after tomorrow, in 20 years. But I think in 20 years, if we do it today, we have very good programs to help people to navigate reality in 20 years without jobs, yeah? So what does it mean? Let's start now. But I think now we have priority to bring people to work. And how do we battle this, yeah? So what I would like to see more is shifting priorities in terms of what we can do with public funding and private funding if they are ready to risk and a bit innovate, yeah? I think we need to have proportions of this money spent on innovating without a clear idea what we are doing. I think too often we need to have very clear idea what we are doing with education, training, and non-formal learning. I think sometimes we just need to have money to do things and see what happens. And I think that should be the institutional proportion of money spent on that. So that's what I would like. I think it's very difficult to see what we can do in terms of training, youth work, and education if we are not allowed to experiment, innovate, and so on. And I think one of the big loss we had in pandemic that we were not allowed to do that. We need to froze everything, yeah? While all the other sectors, they did crazy things for the same money or even getting extra to do crazy things. In our sector, we got cuts, we got suspensions, we got penalties for innovating, you know? So I think that's where I would like to have a call, really. Let's open up and be more innovators with what we do without too much of thinking, yeah? Let's do things in a way, yeah? And things will be all right, because I trust that people involved in our sector, they are following a lot value-based education, yeah? So values are still fundamentally not changing so quickly, yeah? So if we trust NGOs, youth workers, educators in non-formal education, they will deal well with these resources available, yeah? So we do need to control them too much in a way, yeah? So something what I want to say, yeah? And then in terms of future of learning and so on, I think it depends how far we go into the future. I read about one spider's species which genetically transfer learning from one generation to another. So if we will work well on genetic manipulations, maybe we will not need to have learning institutions anymore. in the future. Or another crazy thing, I think one of the most demanded jobs and what many young people want to do, they want to be coders and code artificial intelligence, which basically humans start serving artificial intelligence to train artificial intelligence and so on. Even I sometimes consider I would like to be not human trainer anymore, but AI trainer, because one thing we say, AI lack human feeling. So if I could train AI to be more human, how wonderful it would be in a way, yeah?
Yeah, I'm sure glad you're not in biology field, Neris, I think, with some of the proposals you have, but interesting ideas anyway. Hilary, what is your take on this?
Yeah, my mind is boggling. If we accept that youth work, or our starting point is that youth work isn't neutral, you know, that in a situation where we are both trying to acknowledge our diversity and celebrate our diversity, but also find points of unity, then I think that's one of the big challenges facing human beings, is how we live peaceably alongside people who are different than us, and where we have some very, you know, scary examples of that not being the case around us. But if we think that youth work is, if we accept the things that are said, so whether they're in some of the European, you know, the policies or the notions of youth work being around democracy, that it's about citizenship, it's around participation, then the education and training for that work needs to replicate those ways of working and needs to create opportunities for people to learn with and alongside people who are different from them. And so to do that in face-to-face ways, because sometimes there's a lot to be said for being in the same room as people who are very different from you and learning how to share the space, but also to do it in sort of virtual and blended sort of ways as well. I think we also need in youth work to resist the individualizing tendency of the work and the focus increasingly around sort of individual welfare. So how then do we understand society? How do we understand diversity and inequality in society? And how do we work with young people so that they get to develop some analysis of society beyond their own individual circumstances? And then how do they bring together all of these great, you know, using the techniques that both of you were talking about to try and imagine, both to understand the world that it is, as it is, and to imagine a different future. And if we think about youth work as an educational endeavor, as a pedagogy, then I think one of the things that, and I really like, so I like bell hooks again, as I mentioned already, and I really find her idea of you as education as the practice of freedom really liberating, I think for me. And if we think then that if part of youth work then potentially is about learning, so this idea of the dual purpose of education is about learning to live well, but also then creating a world worth living in, then in ways we have to, our methodologies, our approaches, our educational processes have to replicate that. Which means a lot of experimenting, a lot of trying to figure out, sometimes getting things wrong, starting again, failing, picking up, and risking not knowing. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can say as youth workers is, I don't know, but going to that piece, but let's find out. So that curiosity, engaging our own curiosity, our own bravery, and our own willingness to use some of the great, say, the tools, you know, whether you mentioned design learning, but helping us to reimagine how we think about things and to embrace, I suppose, more diverse ways of thinking and creating futures and alternate futures. And on the question, there was a question there, and I know it wasn't for me, but one of them was about, you know, a good science fiction book. I have to say, I find Marge Piercy, Woman at the Edge of Time, one of the most extraordinary books I've ever read, because it gives that idea, it gives us hope for alternates. And I think that's one of the things that we need to stay going in order to be prepared for the future, is to believe that it's not predetermined in some way.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's very handy that you can actually see
I know,
the questions
I'm
and
sure.
pick up on them. So maybe, and then in a moment we'll actually give you some time to breathe and then process, and then we'll come back to our speakers. But maybe before, we have some sneak peeks, but maybe, Laimonas, you can pick a good question.
And I'd like to ask, I don't know, Sabrina, who is controlling on your side? We are in control. Please do not move the Menti, okay? Because then we want to be in control here, what we see in the screen, okay? Okay, good. Right. So one thing was mentioned about the science fiction book. If you have anything to recommend, I think Nerijus mentioned he's into it. I don't know if Nerijus, you can quickly mention maybe something that you would say, hey, for youth workers, that would be a really interesting thing to read and consider some interesting future scenarios.
Yeah, for me, I think it's, I wouldn't recommend one particular book, but I would definitely recommend look for authors who are not white men and in past history. If you can read any science fiction books from diversity of writers across continents, cultures, ethnicity, religious, and so on, that's what you should do. Yeah, don't read classical white man book of science fiction in the last 60 years. Yeah, I'm telling this because that's where I kind of, in my mind, I battle the most. When I was reading the author who is not white man, I was battling in addition to whatever ideas I was exposed to. Yeah, so that's one recommendation. And then there are titles. You can search for non-white man science fiction books, and you will get list and start reading from the first one till the end, and then you will get your own list. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with that. I think also a tip might be there's a show which is very sci-fi. It's called Real Humans. They made an American version of it, but it's originally a Swedish show that is on Netflix, and it basically shows what would happen if you would have human-like robots living sort of in society, and all the types of questions it raises. And what I like the fact that it has a Swedish perspective. It focuses also, I think, on a lot more like real human aspects. You know, what do we do if we start to attach ourselves to robots, and what does it mean for us as humanity? I thought that was a very interesting, interesting one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe another
Can
one.
we still?
Yeah, one short.
Pick it up. Among the most.
Matthijs, you wanted to add something, or?
Well, I had a peek also at the questions, and it was something I would like to respond to, but I'm not sure if I'm now basically preempting something you wanted to ask.
Maybe we go for that, and then
please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think was a really good point was raised in, I think, two of the questions that said, like, if you have a humanized approach or if you have a human-centric approach, will that also then lead that it's too personalized? If we get to a stage where we don't see ourselves as part of like a bigger community, and are there also examples of where that happens? So I think that part of having a humanized and human-centric approach is, I think, really focusing on that community aspect, because I think that is part of our human experience. So I think we should always take that into account. But I do think in terms of learning trajectory, sometimes different people need different things at different times, apart from the social aspect. And I think this is where some of these technologies can help. A really good example of people working together, so not having like the Elon Musk, one individual seen as the savior of the world, but people getting together to make changes, is a platform called Open IDEO. And it's a non-profit started by IDEO, which is a design thinking company based in London and LA, I think. They're sort of one of the groundbreakers for design thinking. And they created this platform to work together on societal topics. So how can we make life safer for women in slums in India? Or how can we make sure that we pollute less and things like that? So they have really interesting things going on. And there you see a huge community getting together to try to solve a problem, which is quite interesting.
Thank you so much. And maybe with this teaser, we actually turn to you now, and we will be monitoring the questions and actually expecting more of them. And also, I think it's fair to say, not, of course, be able to answer nearly all of them, but therefore to stay with us. And then we address them through the workshops. We address them tomorrow as well, and so on.
We have a list of 28 questions already. So.
Exactly.
We can stay all day, you know, going through these.
I'm not sure that our speakers will be.
It's great to see the interest, really, and a lot of, and I see also from very different angles, you know. There is a question on like different policies that are kind of being dropped on youth workers and how to navigate there. There are questions which are more about the role of youth worker. I see also questions which are more like, when we talk about the future, is it like, are we forgetting here and now, you know? So like, I think it's natural that we start putting kind of, you know, to put this on different ends, like, you know, both things as something to be like contradicting each other. So I see a few questions here like, oh, if we think about the future, does it mean we think less about the present? Yeah, this is I find the question itself also interesting. Yeah? Or, for example, if we say there's a future fit youth worker, are they more anticipating trends or are they counteracting trends? Well, probably, I believe, it depends on the trend, right? What you want to do with it.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see the perspectives of the questions coming from the audience as well.
Indeed. And I think this is what we would then want to enable you, and also here and online, to maybe share these questions with your neighbors. Yeah, and see, is it something that I'm only wondering, and maybe you already have an answer, or is it something that is shared, and maybe it's our common kind of worry or something like that, or a common idea that is being born. So the invitation is actually to spend the next 15 minutes to process a little bit what you've heard, because we heard actually quite a lot from our three guests here, and to kind of try to sense what resonates, what stayed with me, what questions are coming more, maybe what comments do I have, and also what calls for action. Yeah, and then we had a discussion previously, try to also see, and maybe we'd come to this, yes, here and now, but also trying to sense what is calling us from the future. Yeah, if we can, but that's one of the competences that arguably we could all develop. Yeah, to see also, is there some invitation for us to make, to do, to invest, to get closer to this calling from the future. So for the next 15 minutes, we invite you to turn to your neighbors, try to process what you heard, try to sense what is coming, to go to your breakout rooms also, to share there, and then we come back. You can still use the Menti, and we will address a couple of more questions with our speakers, and then we will close the session for today. All right? Good. And we invite our speakers that are not with us in the room also to stick around, and we'll call you back for a couple of more questions, if that's okay. Good.
Give me a second. Hey, Matthijs, I just sent you a message in chat, so have a look whenever you can, please.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's also a good one. Yeah, interesting question. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I also have ideas about that, so that's good.
Perfect. Thank you.
By the way, compliments on the whole organization. I'm really impressed with how you guys do this.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you. It's really funny, actually. Also, I'm sitting in the translator's booth now, and it's super interesting.
Yeah, how that works. You can have all the Zoom bridges and go from one to the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're based in Berlin, right? Or
No, I'm living in Georgia, in Tbilisi.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm freelancing. I'm doing different trainings and conferences. So
okay,
I just joined this group.
Okay, nice. I have a lot of students from Georgia.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, really nice. Yeah. I also learned
sorry.
So you have to do your thing. Sorry, yeah, go for it.
Yep. Yeah, sorry. I just need to.
No, you're working. So
Yeah.
sorry, just chatting. Yep.
Welcome. Well, not welcome back. You're already here. And we are really sorry to interrupt your conversations. But we wanted to give you a few more minutes with the speakers as well. You can also ignore us. That's of course. But hopefully you will not ignore the speakers. That's our hope there. Yeah. So we see Matthijs. Matthijs, welcome back. And hopefully Nerijus will appear on the screen as well. So now, for a few more moments, after your conversations and some questions that arrived, we would like to, welcome back, Nerijus. We would like to pick up on some of these questions and then hear what our speakers have to say. And again, not to worry, the questions stay with us. And actually, this intro was also meant to feed into the workshops that are coming. Yeah, and we know that some of these questions will be also picked up in the workshops. Yeah, so worry not. But then, Laimonas, you have questions for us.
Yeah, so unfortunately we cannot pick all, but we took one that is in the top 4 actually. And the question is, how do we ensure the future fit of youth work is developed a bottom-up approach rather than prescribed by governments and institutions. So that's a question, and also I think it connects a little bit to a few other questions there in the list. So it would be interesting to hear a position on that. So it's a little bit probably about competences and initiative and how do we approach it from within.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think this relates a bit to my personal frustration, because what you typically see is that you have, if you go to any policy institution, whether it's the European Commission or national governments or even regional governments, you see that some parties have really good lobbying. So they describe their own preferred future and lobby governments to get that preferred future into the policy documents. And what you typically see with, I think, more non-profit public institutions is that they fail to do so. So, and particularly when it's decentralized, is something we saw repeatedly, for instance, during the COVID crisis, that government had all these support schemes, but the least organized sector, at least in my country, was the cultural sector. And they were therefore constantly ignored because they weren't just basically chasing politicians as much as others would do. So if this bottom-up approach, and I really believe in that also for learning, because I think, different regions, different cultures need different things, I think is very important, but then you need to make yourself heard. And it means starting with getting together, formulating a vision of what you want, and then lobbying it. Because if you don't, then government commission needs that will probably be also based on input of others will become more important than your needs. So that's just my personal frustration. And this is something where, for instance, backcasting as a methodology can really help to really think like, where do we want to go and how do we get there? Yeah, so that's my 2 cents. I really hope the public sector gets a stronger voice in that sense.
Thank you. We hope as well.
For me, I think if institutions would prescribe futures thinking as a way, direction, priority, and then allocate enough resources, I'm happy to see that. Bottom up will pick it up. For me, I think it's already happening right now. I mean, youth workers think about future in more systemic way, not just like only on fear level. Yeah, I think organizations already starting to do more about systemic work on futures and creation and exploration and research. So I think if institutions would prescribe more of that and give more resources, we can scale. So I think now I'm ready to scale. Give me the context of institutions who want to prescribe such work, what I think we are doing already. Yeah. So for me, it's more, I could feel natural a bit of resistance, why we need to kind of juggle between present needs and future to be needs, yeah? Here, I think that's where bottom-up approach is needed, that we need to shift a bit our view, only we need to deal with now in here. I think we need to do with now and here, with a bit of attention and more increasing attention to future. Past, I'm not sure, I'm not a fan of the past, I have loss of memory. So for me, that would be my response.
Hillary?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? I accidentally came upon the person who asked the question, so we were talking about it when Liminus came over and said we're going to talk about this question. So that was interesting. The thing that strikes me about this one is it's something about, you know, that question for me about like, well, who owns youth work and what shapes youth work? And even who are youth workers, do you know, all of those big questions. But when we talk about a bottom-up approach, what's the bottom that we're talking about? Like, is it young people? Is it youth workers? Is it youth work organizations? Is it things that are happening in countries, in different countries? But I think some of what we've got to do is create an appetite for the conversation within our constituencies, whatever those are, and create an appetite for youth work and for what young people experience in youth work, and to in some way also capture and tap into youth workers' imagination about their work and their sort of sense of passion for the work, because that's certainly what I experience when we have people coming to the work, to Maynooth, to our university, one of the questions we ask people is like, what's the fire in your belly about? Do you know, what is it? So that notion of what is it that's driving you? So I think if we can begin to create a sense of a we among youth workers, a way of identifying within each other as part of something larger. So it's not just me and the young people I work with in my centre or my club or on the streets, that I'm part of something bigger. Then I think we can create a space for youth work and youth workers to then also being able to maybe influence much more directly and in fact potentially counteract or contradict some of the tendencies that might be coming from national and European levels, because the interests aren't always the same. Sometimes the language of democracy might be the same, but what do we mean by democracy and various ways that democratic life can be experienced and be lived? So I think that there's a real need there for us to find our people, to have those conversations and to create the appetite from, you know, that notion of the ground, wherever our ground happens to be, but then to do it in a way that actually creates some sort of a collective voice. And some of that, I think, also means beginning to articulate our practice, being able to write about our practice, and so that youth work creates voices for itself and starts doing its own, and youth workers start doing their own writing and their own communication about the work, because otherwise I think we end up risking either getting written about in ways that don't make sense for us or don't reflect our realities, but also written out, so that the youth worker pit of youth work gets written out. And so therefore I think that youth workers, as well as working with young people collectively, also need to begin to think about how to collectivize themselves to be part of that system of lobbying and creating change, and not only think about the work that we do in the space, in the immediate space that we're in.
Thank you, Hilary. Anything else there, or shall we slowly? No. Then we hope that you still have a couple of minutes for us for one last question, which is that three of you you share some things, like work in the academia or work in the youth worker training or education and so on, but you also have the insight into different realities. So the question then for all three of you, since our topic is education and training of youth workers, or education and training in general, how ready are we for Future Fit? And maybe what needs to change for us to be ready in academia, in the international youth work training, and maybe also in the companies, in the business, and so on. Yeah. I saw some, like Matthijs went with the eyes like really wide open.
Yeah, it was sort of like my thinking eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like wow. Yeah, so a couple of sentences if you can share, just because then we enter in the workshops with Future Fit, with competence-based approach, with national, international training and education. So if you have some messages for us.
I don't know who would like to start.
I can. I think one thing, in terms of us as a sector, if we think, I think we are more than ready. We were ready 20 years ago. If I look at the skill set which is in demand right now, I think it's just more again, lacking of recognition. But I think it's also due to our nature. Recently, I was listening to a book about society without work, and they say the automation will affect the works which are very difficult, which are very easy to describe. But because we have difficulty to describe what we do, we have least risk to be automated as youth workers, educators, trainers in non-formal education. Because ourselves, we spend hours and hours trying to explain to each other what we do. So imagine doing that to a programmer who needs to program and then test on you, and you say, no, that's not gonna happen. Yeah. So I think in terms of readiness, we are ready. I think we just need to be more self-acknowledging and realizing that we are fit for future to some extent, and then we can scale that. I want to emphasize scaling of that. And again, back to resources. If you want to scale something, you need to have resources for that. Yeah. So I think if more youth work would be around us everywhere, I think we would have better futures. That's my very biased and subjective message.
Thank you, Dennis. We take it.
I think for me there was also another question there about sort of bubbles. Are you and of course, I mean sometimes we are, and then. But I also think, well, we're also sometimes in really good company in our bubbles. But maybe what we need to be doing is also thinking about finding common ground, figuring out where we stand. So that piece, I think, that you're saying is really important, is about acknowledging what we already know and who we already are, and not being self-effacing about that, and not just saying, oh, we just do this and we just do that, but actually, you know, okay, not overcomplicating it, but actually talking in some ways about the complexity of the work and the here and now-ness of the work, but also that the investment in the work that we do and that young people make in youth work and make in their own lives is also already creating a future. You know, that the future is already here, I suppose. So that I think it's about sharing ground, finding like-minded people, creating alliances, standing that ground with other people and in good company, you know, and I think that bit of it is really crucial. And then not being afraid to try things out, to get it wrong, to pick yourself up, to learn again, and to embrace. For me, it's embracing uncertainty, embracing not knowing, and embracing mistakes with a view to creating something on the basis to learning from those mistakes, to engage our reflective capacities, our critical thinking capacities, to create something else. Because we are trying to create, I mean, the future is ultimately unknown, you know, and so youth work has to essentially be creative, because in the promises we make, it seems to me that we're trying to create a future that doesn't yet exist, and we're not even entirely sure can exist. So, you know, I think we have to be willing to sort of step into the unknown and follow it through in some way to see where it takes us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Hilary.
Yeah. Okay, then my 2 cents, I think youth workers, for as far as what I know about the group, I think is one of the most flexible groups to work with young people, especially compared also to formal education. I think the only group that's probably more flexible are the youth themselves, because that's sort of, I think, ingrained in being young. But I think there are 2 things I would like to add, because I really agree with a lot of what the previous speaker said. I think the first thing is also to think about and acknowledge the fact that the future isn't neutral, and really think about what are the values that will underpin how we are going to shape this future. And that also sort of means that you have to have this mindset that you're not just a passive bystander, that you can actively shape the future and help young people to also shape their own future, or society's future at large. And the second thing, what I often notice in industries particularly that aren't so formally organized, education has that more, I think it would be good also to think of scalability of sharing. So that could be skills development, like what is the skills, how do you define different skills that are needed, but also some tools and insights that you can share that as a discipline. And I think that is something probably that could really help as well, because otherwise a lot of people in smaller organizations have to invent the wheel themselves. And I think there's a lot to be gained from sharing knowledge and insights, and particularly also just very concrete tools. I think some of the examples that Regis was showing, for instance, I think were really interesting because they were so practical and immediately applicable. So that was my contribution.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all 3 of you. We haven't still heard the feedback from the audience, but from here, it was super exciting, super engaging, and we enjoyed it so very much, so hopefully they did as well. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us on the screen and in person, and also to the online audience. And thank you very much. Here in presence, we will have coffee breaks, so hopefully the 2 of you and the rest of the online participants will also treat them to some good coffee, probably better than ours, and some break. And one reminder for people here, and that, I mean, Matthijs and Nerijus, if you would like to join me, but you're more than welcome, is that you're also warmly invited if you would like to at any point to join our MIBO gatherings. You will find information in the lineup, and there you can actually meet people from our online world. So if you would like to hang out with them for a few moments, you go to Meepo. If you haven't tried Meepo, it's super exciting. It's a super engaging platform, and you can spend some time like that as well. Yeah. Other than that, with a little bit of a shorter coffee break, we come back at 11:30 in this room.
Yes.
So thank you all, and thank you, Meris and Matthijs.
Mark.
Oh, hello.
I have a